The world came to us down there. I mean, everybody made the pilgrimage to the wheat fields, those crazy college kids.
The glory days.
And it really was a joke. It was the guys who lived at the greenhouse, which was this legendary party house at Wazoo, saying, could we really have every band in Pullman play at our house?
It was a lot of friends throwing a big party.
If you just do what you're told, you'll never do anything. But if you don't do what you're told, you may well completely have a disaster on your hands.
Do you really think they could have had a concert there without messing up the land?
Yes.
My name's Brian Marin. I was in Pullman from the late 80s to the early 90s. There was something special about Pullman and then like Seattle in the early 90s that was really unmatched about the support of crossover bands. Euphoria or Horse, Ignatius, Dog Vomit. We had a lot of, from punk rock to like, even just like kind of glam rock to crossover pop stuff, Happy Campers, a lot of bands that were just really great musicians. And it was for such a small population. There was a rebellion against, I think, the country vibe of Pullman at that time. Pullman was still very much a cowboy town and a cowboy attitude. And so we all circled together, and I think that helped create that.
The music scene was heavily driven by local, local talent, but that local talent was a mix of people from Pullman, but also residual people who had stayed, who had come for college, and then said, wait a minute, there's something here, I want to stay. So a lot of people, when they go to college somewhere, they find something they like, and so they stay. But it was not just, I think it was a time period also, because the music scene was changing. People were seeking that new sound, everybody was trying to form a band. And you could see it, what was going on in the Seattle area, the whole grunge movement and everything.
Hello, my name is Jim Sangster from the Young Fresh Fellows. I play the bass, and the legal ID for this radio station is KZUU Pullman 95.7! Nothing else will do.
It was very DIY. I really credit Spokane people for this. I became friends with a bunch of people in Spokane. Seattle music could be very like elitist, right? So Mudhoney are big rock stars because they're already in Green River and they're big deal and they're playing. We're going, it's a secret show, or the girls that know these guys that did whatever, In Pullman, and I felt like this maybe got inherited from sort of a Spokane ethic. We're going to make a band. We'll play a show. We'll sell kick ups. Let's just do it. And they would just do it. And the permission wasn't needed there. Right? It was just do stuff. And yeah, we got a living room. Let's do it. And I was so impressed by this. I sort of knew how to go see big bands in Seattle or play at my friend's birthday party in his basement, but I didn't understand how to do more than that. And these guys really just showed me, they just didn't skip a beat. They're like, we're doing a gig. We're starting a band. You don't play bass, that doesn't matter. Let's get going, And there was plenty of opportunity because there were plenty of houses and parties. And lots of people wanted to come to them and see music and all of that. And there was different, very different sort of genres, right? You would have metal bands and you would have punk bands. And I was in sort of a hippie folk rock band, and in a punk band as well. And so jangle pop was the thing at the time, right?
We were a divided campus at that time. There was the Greek system and the GDIs, Goddamn Independence. And they wanted to just play music and be heard. And it's such a party atmosphere in the late 80s, early 90s. And the true grit was in people's backyards and basements and house parties, where people would pack in there like sardines.
You also had this big split between the bands that did covers and the bands that didn't do covers. The bands that did covers got paid a lot of money to play at fraternity parties. The bands that didn't do covers didn't get paid very much money and didn't play those kind of parties. But we did think that we were better than the certainly not from a musicianship perspective, because usually the covers guys were great musicians. But we felt we were better than them, or superior, I guess is probably the better way to say it, because we were, creating art or whatever, which often probably was not the case, but like, that's how we felt. So it was actually very encouraging place. You could start a band, you could get people to play with you. There were many different levels of talent, and you have people coming to see you.
The band Stainless Steel, Evil Chuck, all of those bands that were just playing at any party that people would let them play at. And it wasn't just at the bars. The bars were hosting some bands, like the Cavern was hosting Reggae Night and a few other things, but that's not what a lot of the GDIs wanted. They wanted something else. And the frats and the Greek system would have their own parties and their own bands, but a lot of it was just amplified music of whatever was popular at the time. And a lot of it was hip hop, but that's hip hop wasn't being played at these college parties.
It was wonderful. It was the place truly where I cut my teeth, being in bands, starting bands, playing in bands, running bands. I learned all that in Pullman, and I mostly learned it from Spokane people because, and I feel like there's some sort of, I don't know if it's like there's nothing to do or it's not big enough bands coming through or whatever it was. People in Spokane would have this ability to just say, we're going to do something. No one's going to tell us, we can't do it. We're just going to do it. And so I thought that was really inspiring.
Our first guest, would you please put your hands together and welcome Black Happy.
Bands like Black Happy, some of my favorites were not the most famous. Green Apple Quick Step, Sweetwater, Slam Suzanne, Bam Bam. Lots of great bands that maybe made a bigger footprint than a Black Happy, but Spokane had this, in Coeur d'Alene, both just kind of also had a little scene with no outlet, nowhere to go. They weren't really being invited to Seattle, and if they could hit a road trip for an hour south and go play, then they came down. Bands, new bands. Moscow, Idaho as well. Moscow had a really dark, really good underground music scene going on.
It was a real community of musicians. I enjoyed that immensely, hanging around, talking about music, playing records. Nobody had any money, so if somebody got a new record, they'd be playing it, and it'd be really exciting. They were always, let me turn you on to this, let me turn you on to that. And so I really grew in terms of my taste and in terms of my and just my exposure, like in leaps and bounds by being there.
Is that enough to start? Or?
So I was a student at WSU for 4 years, and I studied psychology there. A lot of musicians rented this big house. I can't remember the address, but it was called the Greenhouse. And it was sort of, there was a lot of houses that were like, the White House because it was white, and the greenhouse was green, and that kind of stuff. Other houses had names because the band that lived there or whatever.
I lived in the greenhouse with a band called The Imposters, which was a kind of hard rock cover band, Led Zeppelin through whatever. We were throwing parties every Friday and Saturday night. And on Friday nights, I was not in the band, and we'd bring a band from Seattle because my dad owns American Music out in Seattle. We'd bring bands over like Coven or Igniter to headline above my opening act cover band in the basement.
This house probably had 10 people living in it. It was some old big craftsman style house, and absolutely just beat to hell by, a million generations of students. And they had a basement that was suitable for bands to practice and then later play in. I played my first gig in a punk band actually in that basement, in a band called Baby So High. They would kind of rope off between some support pillars, kind of those big square support pillars, and you'd play behind the rope, and depending on how many people were there, it could be quite crowded. And it was one of these things where the renters would drive over to Moscow, Idaho, that had a couple year younger drinking age, and they would buy kegs of beer, then drive them back, obviously totally illegal. So we would play these gigs, and they'd sell keg cups, and they'd make money, and so it was a whole kind of business. And it was sort of usually there was one party on a weekend per night that was somewhere cool, like somewhere where there were bands and us sort of music people, like we weren't, most of us, in fraternities. We were kind of rocker, hippie, kind of proto grunge type people. Punks and all of them kind of mixed in. And it was an integrative time, so you had bands that were sort of part punk, part metal, part funk, part hippie, part whatever. And it all kind of made sense at the time. Bands like the Night Kings came and played, Gas Huffer played, and Death Squad played, and these kind of things. And the basement wasn't huge. I mean, maybe 100 or maybe 50 people, 100 people would fit in there, like just absolutely packed, which at times felt dangerous. Particularly one time the ceiling broke and kind of sagged really clearly. And so whoever had the idea, I don't know who it was, let's have our own, festival there of a weekend.
One Friday night, I'm cleaning. The band already played, so they're sitting out on the porch. And I walked outside and I said, I'm sick of cleaning up on Friday night. We should just have a party that starts on Friday after school and goes till Monday morning. And it was like, yeah, it'd be like, someone said it'd be like Woodstock at the greenhouse. And I just said Greenstock. So that's where I believe it was born, was in that moment. The idea that I was going to book more bands from Seattle and bring them over to play all night, every night, through Friday at 4:00 in the afternoon through Monday morning in the wee hours before going to school on Monday.
Greenstock, 1989, the biggest best you've ever seen in Pullman.
First one was in 1989. I sold 2,000 tickets at $20 a piece, and I ended up able to pay a majority of the house. 9 people lived in the house, pay their tuition. I took all the bands, local bands, out to the Three Forks, our fancy Pullman restaurant, and we had an open bar tab, and everybody was a local band who played Greenstock 1. We used up all the money, the rest of the money, just on one big party one night. But after that, there's a Greenstock 2. I dropped out of school, but I sent the sound system over and whatnot to the greenhouse, and that was Slam Suzanne and some other bands, and I helped book some bands out there and send them out.
I had heard of Greenstock 1 and 2 when I was still at University of Idaho, but I was coming over to party in Pullman, and I attended some of the concerts at Greenstock 2. And then that's what got me involved. It was all of a sudden, because the house got so destroyed, everybody was like looking for, hey, where are we going to go? It was a crazy time, but a lot of fun. And I think the energy of that is what led people to get involved when all of a sudden we started looking for a venue for Greenstock 3.
We want to thank all of you for coming to Greenstock tonight.
This is all word of mouth. You spread word just talking to people on campus, and it's such a small knit community in Pullman and Moscow that all you have to do is say one thing. You commit, somebody's having a party, you spread the word. Don't cancel your party because the word's already been spread, and they will be showing up at your door. It was a different era.
At some point, they moved it outdoors.
We were going to do it at North-South Ski Bowl. My dad has the big PAs, right? So Bumper Shoot, Bite of Seattle. My dad's shop is American Music. So we had a semi, we had a concert size, arena size sound system and backline gear. So at that point, we decided, look, we're going to do North-South Ski Bowl. If you're familiar with North-South Ski Bowl, I knew the owner, and I was like, look, perfect bowl-shaped property. We're going to put the stage at the bottom. The bands are going to live in the place where all the ski school kids spend the night in all those cots. You have a liquor license. We're going to make a beer garden, and we're going to invite bigger bands from Seattle. 3 days before the event took place, we saw a newspaper article that said that the police have decided to deny permit to the North-South Ski Bowl Greenstock, and we drove over forestry land on the road that they could block and not allow access up to North-South Ski Bowl. We'd already built a massive stage for my dad's sound system that was on the way. And at that point, we started to cancel the event. And then I got on the radio. I got on Cougar FM to let everybody know that we're not going to be able to do the concert. We got a phone call that came in live to the station from a professor named Greg May.
I'm shaking because I'm cold, but
Sorry,
I'm all right. My name's Greg May. I got back to this area about 5-6 years ago, spent the 2000s in Southeast Asia.
I don't know if you know Greg May's story, but it's super amazing. He was a professional basketball player.
He lived on this acreage up a mountain, like, you know, I don't know, 20, 30 miles outside of Pullman.
And he was the wilderness survival instructor at Washington State. So he had a course where he would take people out and teach them wilderness survival skills.
He hunted Sasquatch every year. And he was like a survivalist, intense.
He literally had grants and things to find Sasquatch.
He was a very nice guy, just, eccentric. But, that was cool. Like we didn't want to be basic, square, normal people. We weren't living that life.
He called into the show and said, I've got a piece of property down the Snake River. Would you be interested in having Greenstock at my house? So I, live on the air, said, that sounds really interesting. I sent a couple scouts down to go check the property in the middle of the night. They climbed up the mountain. They said, I don't know, man, we can't see much up here, but it looks like it could possibly work. So that night we decided to tear down the stage at North-South Ski Bowl and move it to Greg May's property out on the Snake River, right above the dam there.
All I said was to just close the gates and clean up after yourselves.
All of a sudden now I'm booking, Sweetwater and Bam Bam and bigger Seattle name talent, even Canadian talent, Mushroom Trail, folks who were touring, folks who knew what they're doing. I paid them $0. They asked me for gas money. Said there's no gas money, there's no nothing, there's no security, there's no porta potties. I came home from that being loaded in. I came up to my house in Rini Park, and the police had kicked in the door to my house with a warrant that said attempting to throw a party without a permit. Once you pass 2,000 people expected on your private property, it becomes public. Back to Woodstock rules of we're not letting this happen in our town type of thing. I got a phone call from Sheriff Thompson, who was down at Colfax, and he said, Brian, we're sending another warrant. We found some other things in your house that maybe aren't allowed. So we're getting a second warrant. We have all your posters and everything for Greenstock showing that you're the promoter creating the show, and we're arresting you for that. The judge is sending a second warrant for the paraphernalia and your knife collection. Like just stupid knives I collected from around the world or whatever. So they put me in the cop car and they took me down to Colfax, down to the steps there. I walked up the stairs and they set us at the board table. Sheriff Thompson walks in with a box of a little bit of marijuana in a box and the knife collection, sets it on the table with all the police officers around a boardroom table and says, look, you're going to get kicked out of school. We're going to press charges against these blades that exceed a certain length with drug paraphernalia, but we're going to let you go on all of it. We're going to let you stay in school if you'll walk outside and tell the press that Greenstock is canceled. They said, Brian, we have people calling from Eugene who are coming in buses. We got people coming from Berkeley. We got people coming from Spokane, Seattle. You need to call this thing off. And Sheriff, I agreed. I wanted to stay in school and all those things. But Sheriff Thompson walked me outside holding my arm, and there was press out there. There was about 3 cameras and some just handheld little recording devices. But then Sheriff Thompson got kind of stage fright, said, okay, we'll let him know. And he walked back in the doors of the courtroom. And now my handcuffs are off. And I'm sitting there going,
Did you have any legal advice, a local attorney here that...
Tim Esser.
Yeah.
He suggested I withdraw permission, which I did on the county court steps. I just said I withdraw permission for Greenstock to use my land. However, the whole community is welcome to my rattlesnake moving, teepee warming private party. And I walked away.
So Greenstock's a go. And my friends pulled up in front of the courthouse to bail me out. We ran down the front lawn of the Colfax courthouse and jumped in the back seat of the car. I knew they'd come look for me right away, Sheriff Thompson and whatnot. At my house in Rainey Park. So we went straight, which was a day before Greenstock was supposed to start at Greg May's property, went straight down to the Snake River. And already there were cars from the dam all the way to the turn where you hit the bottom there. So about maybe 3-4 miles of solid cars on both sides of the road, people carrying their coolers and their tents and all that stuff.
I had a ride with the sheriff to town to meet with the county prosecutors, and they were trying to figure out what to do also. And because hell, nobody knew whether it was going to be Woodstock or whether it was going to be, you know, a party with a couple thousand of my closest friends who I'd never met. I came back across the river with Jerry Reeves and stopped by one of the cops and said, and Jerry leaned out the window and said, "What's happening?" And the deputy, some old survivalist is having a concert up there. Really? Who is it? Oh, some guy named Greg May. We're looking for him. Really? What are you gonna do when you find him? We're gonna fry his. Really?
So I got up there and they were kind of had me in hiding because I was like the target of stopping it for the police. So yeah, I met Greg May for the first time right then because I'd been doing all the other promotional stuff, and he rode up on a horse in his handmade clothes. He was a full-blown layman, and he jumped off his horse and he spread the legs of a sheep that was right there and bit its off as I first met him and neutered it and said it's the cleanest way to do it. And this guy's been frisky, he needed to be neutered. Like he did. I was like, holy crap, you know, like what did we get ourselves into here?
I don't think Brian was there, but I'm sure that story got around. But
he made me immediately strip down, get in his handmade big trough hot tub, and just started talking about how this was going to go down. As we're sitting there, we're watching the landing strip down at the bottom on the river where there's a little runway. The police Cessnas were landing and dropping off staff, and they were bringing a lot of people over and over and over again from Pullman, and cop cars were starting to show up in that lot. Greg May's telling us, bring it on, like he didn't give a crap. But then he had night vision equipment for looking for Sasquatch. So at nighttime, we were watching the police all the way down below with these binoculars that were huge.
The sheriffs, they kind of made it known that you'll never make it to the top of the hill. The sheriff will be there. That was a good move by the sheriff's department then to make that known. So you don't even think about buzzed. If you've been drinking, don't even think about getting behind the wheel because you'll never get out of the canyon. We'll get you. The guys who organized it, they were pretty gutsy. The powers that be were making very sure that making those kids believe that they were at risk if they did this. In general, if you let people live their lives in peace, they'll be fine. The organizers of Greenstock, they made it pretty clear that this is somebody's home, and it might only be a teepee and a shack, but it is still somebody's home.
That year, you know, it was a hike to get up there, right?
It was a lot of work in the sense that Debbie Heilman and I took 3 cases of beer up the side of that cliff to Greg May's place.
They were dedicated by God. And somebody had said, you got to hike for your right to party, or whatever it was. What a great line that was.
We made several trips. Once base camp was established and people started showing up, we didn't leave for a few days. And just being above Lower Granite Dam and having live music and, you know, knowing the musicians, everybody was friends, everybody was chipping in and, you know, taking care of each other. Great camaraderie.
It was very duct taped together at that point because the stage wasn't great because we could only bring so much of the stage from the North-South Ski Bowl. I had my roadies from American Music in Seattle, so I had a light tech, I had my sound engineers. They built the PA right. We used a Willys truck that was up there as an anchor for one side of the stage.
Bands couldn't get up there. Bands couldn't make it, whatever. My band, which was a goofy joke band at the time, called Voodoo Hot Dog. We just got up and borrowed guitars and played 5 songs. Sweetwater played. You know, it's sort of getting drunk all weekend and hanging out in tents with your friends, and you know, it was super fun.
You got grandma up here, you better put her in the tent.
You know, the bands played incredible. Bam Bam, Horse, Green Apple Quick Step. Some of the big moments I remember being Black Happy, for sure. Black Happy moment. At Greg's house, they came out and they said, "Hey, do you remember this?" And they're like, "Wah, wah, wah." And the whole crowd, you know, and there's a lot of different estimates on the side of the crowd, so I'm not going to go there.
Motherlode, he went through the stage and he's just playing his guitar. You know, it was so much fun. A band called Awake played. Roy Ball was out there. Evil Chuck was out there. I mean, there was a lot of great bands out there. Last Call played.
I remember, like, where's the bathrooms? There's no bathrooms, right? And over the corner of the hill was like just, you would go up the hill and down, and this is where people were going for privacy, and there was just a field of toilet paper, like a million pieces of toilet paper. And I thought, oh, this is fun.
But that was day one, and it grew from there to probably double that. So my guess of that first one's probably, you know, somewhere 10 to 12,000 people. You know, full hill, full tent villages up on the top. The property wasn't very kind. I mean, I can't believe we didn't get major injuries. The dogs was a big part of the story. They had packed, and people didn't realize their dog would pack with other dogs, but we had about 100 dogs that packed, and people couldn't get their dogs back. They would not come back to their owners. And a husky was out front, and they're running over tent villages and stuff, and nobody can control the dogs.
Just great memories. I mean, that kind of continuity, it's hard to find that anymore. It's out there. I mean, you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you've got food, water, and a sense of belonging. That's third on the list. That's pretty high. And that was found in music. Everybody shared that. That was the common denominator at that point in time, was live music. You know, we'd listen to records, sure, but the whole thing was to play and share that experience. Whole different level.
A lot of people for 3 days, right? Participating in things to keep you up for 3 days.
The sheriff did say he wanted to get a measure of control, and they did. You know, there were no fatality accidents or anything. And because they were there, I'm pretty sure that's why kids didn't try to make it back home. And somebody had said, wisely said, you know, if you're sober enough to walk down that hill without breaking your leg, you're probably sober enough to drive. So it was good. The kids, they couldn't have been friendlier as a whole, and you know, always asking me if there's something they can do, something can help. And the bunch, heck, they must have collected 300, 500 bags of garbage. I met the sheriff at the county fair that summer, and he said, "So, Greg, what are you going to do if they asked to do it again?" I'd say, "Well, they did everything they said they were going to do." He said, "They should go ahead." And he said, "I think so too." We were very fortunate to have Sheriff Thompson. He was, I mean, I haven't seen him since, but he was as straight up as a person could be. And I'm sure it wasn't the most popular thing that was happening in the county at the time, but we did everything we said we were going to do, and the sheriff did everything he said he was going to do, and it worked out all right.
The Greenstock parties out at Greg May's property on the Snake River were sort of descendants of a party that happened at Wazoo for many years down at Boyer Park called Water Bust.
Yeah.
And so that there was sort of a through line between those things. So people already kind of knew at Wazoo to go out, that you would go out there and have parties.
Hey, what about this whole Greenstock thing?
But then having it on this really huge property on the side of a hilltop was something unique, to be sure. My name's Chris Briegel. I went to Washington State from 1987 to 1992, and worked at the Daily Evergreen at that time. and was the editor for a while, and also one semester ran the Borderline, which was the Evergreen's entertainment section every Friday. And I kind of helped throw the 1992 party. In 92, I worked with a guy named Mike Gibson Hartwell, and some other people. And they handled the logistics of getting the bands and all that stuff. And I helped with publicity. We also, we talked to a local lawyer about how we could kind of put this on. And mostly they just said, well, it's Greg who's assuming all the liability because it's his property. But you really can't you shouldn't charge anything because, then that really, put some liability on your shoulders. We had football players kind of being informal security because they were like going to the party. But I remember one of them came up to me in 1992 and we asked these guys, just kind of be around and kind of like, just make sure things go okay. And he said, there's so many people here. We can't control this. There's thousands of people here. And so just hope everybody has a good time. And it really was pretty, as much as a gathering of thousands and thousands of mostly hard rock and heavy metal fans, fueled by beer could be described as mellow. It was relatively mellow.
Some guy managed to light his tent on fire and got severely burned. A helicopter came and took him away.
The kid was up on top and was trying to make a meal out of with an old pump Coleman stove, and the thing blew up on him. And so everybody on the hill got together, and they pretty much formed a line and packed him down.
And 92 Seattle was at the Paramount. I'm wearing that shirt now. Like I've got the Greenstock West 1992. That was August 15th. It was mid-August, and there was a heat wave in Seattle, so it was like 95 degrees, but KXRX, the major rock station, promoted it. Ken Cardwell, who didn't live in the greenhouse, but was friends and partied with all of us all the time, and Tony Harrell, they were both big parts of just being in our immediate family of friends, which was Lisa Picotti, lead singer of The Imposters, Aaron Taylor, Mike Hartwell, who's now Gibson Hartwell, Jim Bader, Rick Garrett, who is Dog Vomit, who would be the lead singer of The Imposters when they become a punk rock cover band. All these people had a big part of it, but Ken Cardwell ended up going to KXRX and becoming the programming director, like a director level at KXRX. So he knew about Greenstock and wanted to help promote. There was super bands, those guys from Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and Green Apple Quick Step and all those guys, because now it's 1992 and Seattle music scene's exploding. And I brought like kind of the best of the best, Black Happy, and the bands that really shined at Greenstock got to play at the Paramount. I rented it out, the Paramount, but it was super hot, so we only sold like 2,200 of the 3,300 tickets available or something like that. But had a great show, really fun. '93. Now I've graduated from school, and I've signed over responsibility to Joe Williams and Joe Persley, who lived in the Lamba, the Tri-Lam house next to the greenhouse.
We wanted it to continue because we were the younger class who was coming up and got trained by them to that live music and providing music in a venue was important. We were more, I don't want to call us grunts, but we were the engine outside of the music scene. Very few of us that really got involved in getting things going for especially the last Greenstock. Mostly we would go around and post flyers and tell people about stuff, help, like go set up for 3 and 4 out at Greg May's property down in the Snake River Canyon, stay after for multiple days, clean up garbage. It was an organized but disorganized community effort. We got involved because we were supporting it, and then we knew we needed to find a place because you could draw 500 people, 600 people to your house every night if you had music and potential beverage service.
So when 93 came along, I said, look, I'm not going back out to Pullman. It's too risky. I was working with Bauer Kinnear and Deans, who are the big promoters in Seattle now, because now I'm working in American music and my career is I'm managing like Chris Cornell's siblings band, Inflatable Soul. They said, we got to do Greenstock again. I'm like, no, I'll bring the sound system. I'll bring the gear. I'll bring the setup. You got to find a farmer who's got the land, look for a concave bowl, tell the farmer to leave for the weekend, go with his wife to a hotel. We'll give him, 10 grand or something.
Greg May had denied a third. He didn't want to deal with the politics and the potential issues associated with hosting a third year. So we started looking for another venue. We know this is going to be the biggest. This is going to be bigger than what we did before, and parking is always an issue. So at least we had the level of thinking about how can we get people somewhere and they can park so we don't have a transportation issue, a violation issue on state routes or county roads or things like that. So we started looking for farms or anybody who is willing to have potentially what we thought at the time, maybe 4,000 to 5,000 people, not 11,000 people, come to their property. We eventually had somebody come forward and offer up their property, and we tried to make it work.
Now, the city of Kendrick wasn't exactly on board with this, were they?
No, city of Kendrick or Troy or the whole county. Here we are we're not even in the same state. There was a little bit of public outreach early on, but I don't think they really expected us to really go for it. And we did.
We got up a petition, and we had a lot of people sign that said, not to have it. We went to the county commissioners. One of the county commissioners looked at it, and we didn't know what we were doing. So we knew all the people. We had virtually all of them signed. And they said, well, you don't have addresses on here. And so that's not a valid petition.
This is where I wish I had then the brain that I have now in planning and land use, because I wouldn't have placed Greenstock 5 up above in the foothills, up above the Palouse in April. That land just can't support it, which was I was told by a local farmer during a public outreach meeting that it'll just turn into a mud pit. And we were just a bunch of college kids who wanted to have a big party, so we weren't really listening to the local farmers. And now it's the best advice that anyone's ever given me. This was a soil conservation parcel. The owner was actually getting tax write-offs for not tilling his land for soil conservation.
So far, the soil conservation contract has netted Schulberg almost $30,000. It specifically outlaws commercial and camping uses.
Now looking back on that, I didn't know that. I didn't understand it. Now I understand it. And I would never, as a county or a land use permitter, would never allowed this. It's like a herd of buffalo for 3 days, tromping through your field, churning it up.
Nobody was going to do anything about it. And so the overstreet was the sheriff, and he had a good chief deputy. So they come out here to visit me one day. Now this is off the record.
The cops and the farmers out there were often very conservative, very suspicious of us, just based on our hair, which is silly, but that's what it was like back then. And, so they would poo-poo anything we wanted to do. So it wasn't like we were going to listen to them. They weren't like, oh, the city fathers thinks this is a bad idea. Oh, well, we better listen to that. We weren't like that. We were like, screw you. You're trying to just make us have no fun.
They just seemed to move in. I can't tell you, maybe a couple of days ahead of time. But then, towards the weekend, it was just a continual line of cars.
Sicko got invited to come back and play. And we were just getting started. I don't even know if we had an album yet. But I convinced Denny and Josh and our buddy Garen to drive out. They built a huge stage. It was really cool. Rad sound system. They had all kinds of bands. It was like a pretty serious deal.
When we were out building the stage weeks in advance, we were getting snow and hail and rain, and we were having trouble getting our equipment even to build out to the build site. And at that point, I knew that it was going to be difficult, and we were really trying to figure out where we direct the first group of cars. And then Thursday afternoon before the show, people started showing up early, like way early. We had a huge hail and rain event, enough hail so it built up on the ground, and it was so cold at night that sometimes the hail didn't go away. It was right around freezing. So we knew at that point that moisture was going to be a problem, and we looked at the forecast. Well, we were told the forecast by one of the sheriffs, and he said that, hey, you got a lot of rain coming. And we said, okay. And he goes, well, what are you going to do? And I'm like, nothing. We're just going to keep going forward. We've got tarps, we've got protection for the equipment and all that stuff. We're going to try and keep moving forward.
They figured there was 14,000 people here. I remember going out about midnight and went down to visit with the deputy sheriffs, and it was pouring down rain, and they were walking from the corner down there with coolers of beer. I mean, it was a steady line. I was down there for maybe an hour or so, and they were walking from the corner down there to party. And some of them had little kids with them. Just mind-boggling.
My dad just bought the most incredible digital recording studio truck with Mike Smith, who is Fantasy Studios, like recorded every great 70s, 80s album. So we brought that, and so there's that album, which was Mudstock, or what's the name of the album when it finally came out? We show up, it looked great, parked on tilled dry land for 2,000 of the cars.
This is my dad's land. My dad's awesome. My dad's letting us put this on here. I got a couple things to say. All I want you to do is keep the campfires under control. Whatever you bring in, I want you to pitch it out. I want to hear from Joe Williamson, Joe Parsley, the Greenstock Sheriff.
We started music. Black Happy was night one at 9 o'clock at night. The dark clouds rolled in there in Idaho. We're up in the mountains now up there, and it started to just torrentially downpour mid Black Happy, and by maybe, Candlebox was scheduled for the next night, and some other big name talent. I had the guys from Alice in Chains that were going to be the surprise act that couldn't, now they're signed and couldn't be announced, but the rain caused the water table of that property to rise, and all the tents got about 3 inches of water in the base on everybody's sleeping bags, like kind of instantly. Now I think we have probably closer to 20,000 people at the event. The tilled land liquefied, and all 2,000 of those cars went flat to the belly of their cars instantly. And so that trapped everybody parked beyond that were not on the tilled land. There's only one way out.
I remember getting there, and it was already muddy. I drove my Toyota pickup truck out there. There was an access road, I remember, and then you could drive up further to the hill, and there's a parking lot. And I had a load of gear in the back of my truck, under my canopy, and I said, hey, we're a band, we're playing. They said, oh, you park right here, which was just off the access road. And not way up in this parking lot. So I just parked there. I remember watching people, there were some bands that played, and I remember it was one of those things, and you see it like in Greenstock or Woodstock photos and stuff from later, where like the area in front of the stage just became mud because it kept raining. It was already mushy ground, and it got muddier and muddier, and people were just coated. There were mud fights and slam dancing, and very cathartic. I never liked that kind of thing. I didn't want to get muddy, right? Or then sleep in mud, So I stayed away from that and just watched.
Water was getting all my dad's gear. The really expensive PAs and backline gear was getting destroyed because the tarp system on top of the stage wasn't holding that much water. And I tried to push the water off the tarp and with a mic stand, and the mic stand folded in half and hit me in the nose and broke my nose and gave me a concussion. I was throwing up, from the concussion. It hit me hard in the head. I got walloped. They threw me in the back of my van with my sleeping bag. And I passed out back there and woke up in the morning. People are coming up to me with blue lips, and they're freezing, and they're scared, and they're like shaky, and all the food trucks are gone, and people are stuck, and nobody can leave.
It got worse and worse, and rainier and rainier. And there was some telephone call from Josh, the drummer, to me, and they had his police had said, no, you can't go up here anymore. It's too messed up. So he had gotten all the way there with Garen and got turned around and sent back. So it turned from a like, hey, we're all going to do this show. This will be fun. Because, we were a young band. We're like, oh, let's do a show so we can get in front of a lot of people. There'll be a lot of people there, It turned from that to, kind of a disaster. And we couldn't even get in there. And then I remember, there was a tractor that was trying to pull gear out. People were just slipping everywhere. And cars were not moving.
There was a point on Friday where I just started dealing with triage. What was the most hot topic issue? Was it a really angry landowner who was threatening people? Or was it I needed to get a generator to the stage? Did I need to get risers put on the stage to get the tarps attached to? Where could we get more tarps? Things like that. And it was just mainly running from one task to the next. And next it was directing gravel trucks starting on Saturday morning to the site to start building a road for people to exit on, because we knew that we couldn't bring them back up to the top of the slope, that we needed to start bringing them out the bottom where there wasn't currently a farm access driveway or anything like that.
So I was pulling them out. I mean, a lot of them wanted out, after one night they wanted out. I mean, they were just curiosity seekers and they just got stuck. So I was busy pulling them out and they were coming in faster than I could pull them out. I had my logging cat here. I knew that I wouldn't be able to do it. I'd be there all summer long. Because of the rain, people sat in their car and run their heaters, trying to stay warm and dry. I know I did. There were other neighbors who, I don't know how many 5-gallon cans of gas I brought down so that they could get their car going and, we could pull them out and they could get down the road,
All the money started going to those farmers that were helping, from Joe and Joe paying anybody to help at that point. The Idaho police departments all come up and they're all worried about everybody. They call in the Army Corps of Engineers and the Red Cross, and the Army Corps of Engineers start building roads out of DG, little side dumpers. They built these roads in like an hour and started picking the cars up and putting them on the roads. Everybody cheered and the cars were driving out. Within a half an hour later, the roads just sunk into the earth and were gone.
And it was just eating it. The land was just eating this all up. It was barely working.
And I remember looking at the sergeant guy and he goes, that's the only idea we had. So everybody jumped on these buses and went down the Moscow Mall parking lot where they had the Red Cross had set up tents and soup line and blankets and stuff like that.
My car was maybe 30 or 40 feet from that access road, just because this one stoned security guy had said park there, and I never moved it. And so a bunch of guys got behind my car and started pushing and basically pushed it across the mud onto this Corps of Engineer road, and I drove out.
As I was pulling them out, there was a lady from Seattle that had a really expensive sports car. I can't remember what it was. And she was parked in the middle of that. And she said, can you pull me out first? And so I said, well, how am I going to do that with everybody around you? Well, can I get a helicopter in here to lift me up out of here? And she said, I'm not supposed to be over here. That's my boyfriend's car.
Their response was amazing when they mobilized their entire task force. We had horses, we had ATVs, we had a lot of activity out there. We're a bunch of college kids trying to throw, well, at the time we thought was a small music festival, on a shoestring budget, in the middle of nowhere, on maps that are communicated onto the back of a little teeny ticket that's 3 inches by 4 inches. I think a lot of people got lost. A lot of people just followed other people who looked like them to the venue. But no, the city of Troy, the city of Kendrick, and the whole county, I would do it differently. I mean, permits, sometimes you need permits for things. And that would have gone a bit differently. And also listening to what those farmers had to say. The neighboring farmer who said the soils will not tolerate this. They will fail, and you'll be coming looking for help. And that's exactly what happened. I had to eat crow, walk down to his farm and ask for his help and his tractor. And he helped me, but he made sure that I had to work for it. And he modified his equipment with a grinder and some welding, and I got to participate. And then we rode in and we got the generator to the stage and come back the next few weeks and help repair the fences that had either been cut, burnt, driven over, which I was happy to do because of the support we got from the agricultural community. They came, they brought their tractors, and they helped get people out and helped get cars out over the next 2 weeks so people could come back and retrieve their vehicles.
They declared it a disaster, and then the people kind of calmed down and knew they were going to get home and get their car back eventually. And boy, the horse patrol out here, that kept things under control. Those people riding their horses around really kept things under control, that and the rain. If it had been nice, it would have been one hell of a party.
I think people were stuck there for a long time. I think getting people out was difficult, and I think getting cars out, I mean, I heard it lasted months and months and months. It was one of these things, I think, where, you got to sort of credit young people for trying things and being brave enough to just, do more than watch TV and eat and drink what they're told to do, And it seemed just like a fiasco. There was a lot of these kind of things where somebody has this inspired idea, but between all the drugs and the hazardry and the experience, it turns into a disaster. That happened a lot. I think in hindsight, well, okay, I give them credit for having ideas, giving credit for trying things, for, seizing this sort of, youthful moment. I think you can't just build a stage in the middle of a undeveloped farm field and hope that that's going to go well.
Our focus was getting all the garbage and all the cars off site and making sure everybody got their possessions back. There were some people who never came for their cars, and those cars eventually either brought to the edge of the road or left on the hill and got stripped clean of parts and or anything valuable in them. And we had to pay to get them hauled away. And then getting as much of the garbage hauled away over the next 2 weeks, huge dumpsters full of garbage. People just abandoned tents, camp stoves, coolers, kegs, everything. A lot of people just abandoned stuff and got out of there because they had to be bussed away to a facility where they could be warm and fed and clothed, because a lot of people came unprepared.
My goal, after talking to Whitman County and getting the background, when things started to go downhill, my goal was to make it so that they'd never have it again. And I put the pressure on the county and on the sheriff so that they would not allow this to happen again.
Mud, erosion, stream choking silt, all things the government was paying Skip Chilberg to prevent. All things that happened when he allowed a 3-day rock concert on his Latah County land last weekend.
You don't think that you're in violation of the contract?
No. Well, I don't think I am. Now, perhaps the concert promoters violated the contract. I don't understand why that's a news story with me.
It's your contract.
So far, the soil conservation contract has netted Chilberg almost $30,000. It specifically outlaws commercial and camping uses, and both happened during the concert.
Do you really think they could have had a concert there without messing up the land?
Yes.
Chilberg was wrong. Despite a written warning from the government, despite pleas from Latah County commissioners, Chilberg refused to stop the festival.
He was advised, he received a very pointed letter from the federal government as far as the CRP program that this land is in, and he did not respond. He obviously didn't stop it.
Instead, this land was damaged. Hundreds of cars and people turned this seeded pasture into a 30-acre mud puddle. Chilberg blames the weather, the promoter, but not himself.
That's not your fault?
No. Did I drive on the property?
Did you make any money off the concert?
No. I told Holly that last night, too.
Also Tuesday night, Chilberg said whatever damage there was to the land could be repaired, but in the meantime, concert mud is pouring into a sensitive stream And there are new questions about Spokane County's newest commissioner. Jeff Humphrey, KREM 2 News.
The long-term fallout, we did hear about people who wanted to bring suit against us as the promoters. We did have a lawyer on retainer, but we also had something printed on the ticket and at the entrance to the venue that it's like not responsible for lost, damage, or stolen items, stuff like that. We never had a suit come against us as the promoters that was successful, and we never actually really got anywhere. The landowner, he stepped forward and recognized the fact that he gave us permission to do this, and he really took it all on when he maybe didn't need to.
They went down hard at Mudstock. That was pretty much a big sad chapter of Greenstock.
Skip Chilberg sent us this statement. Had it not rained 1.5 inches in 24 hours, the event would have been a huge success. No one predicted or could have prepared for that weather catastrophe. No laws were broken. My daughter and I have been in frequent contact with the Latah County Sheriff. He had no problem with the planning of the event. Latah County Commissioner sent me a bill after the event. Since no laws had been violated, there was no basis for the charge. There was no permanent damage to the land. Some damage occurred as tractors towed cars from the field, necessitating reseeding about 1 acre.
After that, it became kind of this running joke. It's Mudstock, Greenstock, and then it became folklore. And then it was like, okay, who's going to hold the next one? And it just didn't happen.
So my editor at the Scene magazine, Rick Nesbitt, asked Skip Chilberg, he goes, why don't you throw another one to pay the fine? And he goes, that's not a bad idea.
I left Pullman in '95. A bunch of the people who were involved in it had already left or also left in and around '95. And the university was shifting also at the time. The university was these large-scale parties. They were being identified as the largest party school, them in like Wisconsin. They wanted to get rid of that image. That intense party culture and the music scene, I think, went with it. I can't speak to the music scene because I think naturally universities attract creativity and music, but I'm not sure if the same angst or desire or upbringing of people is still present at our modern universities that would have led to an intense underground music scene. Because I do attribute the success of the Greenstocks that became before Mudstock to the local musicians and the local people of Pullman and Moscow than more to the students, or to the students who maybe stayed and became locals.
It was a whole different world back then. It was a whole different world. And everything now is so structured and it's such a big machine. Whenever you get that many people together, there's lots of requirements. And I mean, there's precedence for it, I'm sure. Of course there is. Like our shows.
After that, I was like, okay, I don't want to do house parties. I don't want to play in some guy's field. You know, I want to play in a club that has a stage and electricity and a bathroom and some semblance of security and a sound guy. You know, like it sounds good, but you're really sort of opening yourself to all levels, all sorts of, you know, risk and fiasco by getting involved with something that's sort of unmanaged and outside the sort of the standard path. And I think that's sort of, those things are in dichotomy, right? Like, one is, if you just do what you're told, you'll never do anything. But if you don't do what you're told, you may well completely have a disaster on your hands. Like, these two things are in competition with each other. And so I think it's an interesting to look back on. And I would just also say that now that I'm an old man, I would never, ever do that crazy shit. No way. There you go.
You know, I've gotten to do some really big things in my life musically, and I think Greenstock helped create that. You know, I had a foot in the door with American music and Don Ware's Music City and all the bands. Like, 'cause got back to Seattle, and that made me friends with the guys in Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam. I work at iHeart Media today, where I do the in-store music for iHeart that I created called iHeart CX. All that was because of Greenstock. Greenstock is going to be, I think, my 15 minutes of fame, unless I got some swan song at the end. I love Greenstock in my history. You know, like by my bed, I still keep the first medallion, which that's how we got away from selling concert tickets. Aaron Taylor and Bruce Anderson and Vic Hudak, all artists in Pullman, made medallions that said Greenstock, and so the concerts were free if you had a medallion that cost $20. So we sold medallions, and the cops couldn't say we were selling concert tickets. It hangs by my bed because it is probably my 15 minutes of fame was Greenstock, you know.
There was a Greenstock revival thing that got held out here on the west side.
We had a bunch of bands play, like Euphoria and Posters and Dog Vomit, and all these bands that were originally there. Vehement Spevy, which is Fluffy, his real name's Scott, who played with Ian Hernandez. They were always on the bill. They were always, you know, the unsung heroes because they'd have to play at like 10 o'clock in the morning. Bands played every hour on the hour, round the clock, 50-minute set, 10-minute changeover, had a like a crew that would load one side of the stage while it's being pulled the other way. Back up. I've never still seen it run so smoothly, like any festival anywhere where you have a 10-minute changeover with sound check, all new gear, and then the next band gets their full 50-minute set, and then the next band all night, every night for 3 nights, you know? It was intense, but it was, you know, it was cool because somebody came out and played the Triangle for breakfast. You know, Dan Mayer, who is the Irish guy who sung at the pubs, he'd come out with his dog. It was wonderful, you know, turning on all these kids to Irish folk music.
Even talking to Aaron Taylor and other folks, they'd love to do it again, but it's not the same vibe. But what they want is they just want people to get together because it was a cool time and cool people, and we shared a common interest in just, I guess, being alive. And I like that people still want to talk about it, and that my kids want to hear the stories about it because they're entering college now and they're experiencing a very different world. The original Greenstock would have never happened if it wasn't for those people in the bands of like Horse and Pat Gibbs, the drummer. I mean, he was in so many different bands. He's amazing. And he's a genetic researcher that does amazing thing with genetic fish now. Everyone's moved on. But at the time, all people did is work so they could go play music somewhere on the weekends or whoever would host them.
It was a lot of friends throwing a big party, right? I don't want to say that Greenstock's mine. It was just my biggest moment in my life, but there was so many people that had to make that happen. The guys from Euphoria down the street, bass player, Mayer, the lead singer of the Imposters, they created Greenstock. Aaron Taylor, those guys, they were just as much a part as I was. Ken Cardwell, you know, Jason Alcott was, you know, he had a couple zines that he wrote, and he wrote rock zines, Blitzkrieg and another one I can't remember the name of, but he would interview me for like the local Daily Evergreen and be the articles that would get that out, you know, like that. We didn't know at the time that that's what that was doing, but that's what that did. And so a lot of people still, I'll go to Bumper Shoot by to Seattle or events, people wear Greenstock shirts all over the place. They pop out. You know, the early ones, Woodstock is kind of a hippie with a peace sign, and then he gets meaner and grungier as the years go on the shirts. That was Bruce Anderson and Vic Hudak and Aaron Taylor, who did the shirts and the merch and all that stuff. I mean, that made Greenstock legit, right? Because now there's like swag and good swag, you know, like really fun, colorful. People wear it today because it's unique and handmade and tie-dyed, you know, and all that.
It all goes back to the time period. It was, I think, the perfect mix of upbringing of what people had experienced in their life, and when they got to this, like with going to college, this freedom element, and if you identify with this, not only the music but the feeling that goes with the music of independence, and you're different than the norm of what was going on at the time. And then you have the rise of the grunge era. I think everybody it holds on to that. They want to hold on to that. The Gen Xers or whatever. I don't want to label them too much, but it was a perfect timing for a lot of these people who had come from all over the state or neighboring states to this kind of what I consider an isolated community. I mean, Pullman and Moscow are not really close to much, and once you're there, you need to make it your own. And I think we did. And a lot of people also realized that they liked it and they didn't want to leave, and that's why they stayed for the summers. And then you get to know these people over the summer and you start road tripping. And you go to Montana, you go to all these places, but you come back and then you go for another year. Everybody eventually had to grow up, and we all went places. Some people remain. There are still people from that music era that remained in Pullman, but there are people that have come back to the west side. Some maybe stayed on the east side, but they look back on that, and I have conversations with them, and they look at it as the glory days. But some of them haven't given up on that. They still play music. They still go out to venues. They still want to do stuff.
These Pullman bands, nobody knew who they were or what they were doing, but I thought they were phenomenal. And there's this whole core group of people that went on to do very big things in different fields. But what spawned out of Pullman was incredible talent. I mean, even Murrow Hall, when you get into the journalism side of it, wow. The world came to us down there, even with the music. I mean, everybody made the pilgrimage to the wheat fields, those crazy college kids.